And then one thing I want to mention, a very important thing, that United Access is a NMETA member. And this may not be a common thing that anybody's aware of, but it's important because our number one goal as a NMETA member is to ensure quality and safety of accessible transportation for everybody. So what NMETA stands for is the National Mobility Equipment Dealers Association. And as Mary and Jessica will talk, Missouri's Vocational Rehabilitation Program, they only work with NMETA members because at the forefront, again, we want safety and reliability first and foremost for you, our customers, as you're using these mobility products. So now, Mary, I'm going to turn it over to you and Jessica.
So, hey, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming on today. My name is Mary Ross. I am the Director of Rehabilitation Technology for the state of Missouri. I've worked for VR here in Missouri over 20 years. I've been a counselor, then I was a district supervisor, and then I became the Director of Rehabilitation Technology. That covers within Missouri VR, it could be agribility cases, home modifications, vehicle mods, which we're talking about today, and other types of assistive technology. So I'm going to let Jessica introduce herself.
Hey everyone, I'm Jessica Wright. I'm a vocational rehab counselor out of the St. Louis office. I have a caseload of mobility clients, so mostly spinal cord injury, MS, cerebral palsy. I have a bachelor's in vocational rehab and a master's in rehab counseling from the University of Wisconsin-Stout. And I live on the Illinois side of the river. I foster dogs with a local animal shelter. And that's a bit about me. I've been with Missouri for the last 5 years.
So we're going to talk today, and like Monique said, some of these will be generalities because every state is so different, but we're going to talk a little bit about VR as a overarching umbrella. So vocational rehabilitation is a nationwide program that's designed to help people with disabilities prepare for, obtain, maintain, or advance in employment. And the goal is to provide the support and services necessary that empower people to become independent and successful in the workplace. So that could be training, it could be job placement assistance, assistive technology. Those services are tailored to meet individual needs and career aspirations. So VR is the nationwide program. We are under the Rehab Services Administration, which is a component of the Special Education and Rehabilitative Services within Department of Education. And RSA's mission is to empower individuals with disabilities to maximize employment, economic self-sufficiency, independence, and inclusion in society.
All right, before we dive deeper into VR services, let's take a quick look on how we got to where we are. Voc Rehab began in 1918 with the Veterans Rehabilitation Act to provide services to disabled veterans coming back from World War I. In 1920, the Civilian Vocational Rehabilitation Act expanded the services to include Americans with physical disabilities. In 1943, services were expanded again to include individuals that are blind or have intellectual or mental disabilities. And then in 1968, physical accessibility was recognized as a critical part to employment for people with physical disabilities. In 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, was signed into law, which ensures equal rights and protections for individuals with disabilities in employment, public access, and beyond. And then finally, in 2014, the Workforce Innovative and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, modernized programs to better support job seekers with disabilities and connect them with employers. These milestones really laid the groundwork for Voc Rehab today. So let's focus on what VR can do for you now.
And we thought it was important, and some of these slides have a lot of information on them, and we're not going to touch base on all of that information, but if you're like me, you like to look into things a little bit deeper. And so this just provides you a place to go and look at some of that information so you can do research on your own. So we're going to talk a little bit about vocational rehabilitation services, and these are just some of the services that we provide. So obviously we provide vocational guidance and counseling and helping people explore what jobs and career options are available to them and match their interests, abilities, and some of the limitations they may have. We provide employment services and supported employment services to help people learn those job seeking skills, help them find a job, help them learn the job, and then the important thing is helping them keep a job. So that's all kind of a part of that employment services piece. We offer pre-employment services, I can't talk today, pre-employment transition services to students in the high schools. We also provide vocational training, and that could be community college, it could be trade school, university, it could be on-the-job training. Some of our services are financially based, and so this would be one that may depend on different states how that applies. We also can help with some other job-related expenses. We can help at times with some physical or mental restoration services. And then, of course, what we're talking about today is rehab tech and assistive technology devices, those vehicle modifications, driver training, and as we talked before, home modifications, prosthetics, wheelchairs, durable medical equipment, hearing aids, and assistive technology. So employment has to be on the other side of everything that we do. And so we are pretty creative in helping people get and keep a job. Again, this is not exhaustive, and you and your counsel will determine the required services to help you keep your job within your state parameters.
Okay, so who qualifies for VR services? To be eligible for VR, you must have a documented disability that creates a barrier to employment. Require VR services to prepare for, secure, maintain, or advance in employment, be able to benefit from VR services, and be willing and available to participate in the process. VR is funded through a combination of federal and state resources. Some services may be provided at no cost, but there are some that might require financial participation based on your income and needs. Because funding and service availability can vary, we do encourage you to check with your local VR office. All right, so why we're here today to talk about vehicle modification in the process. We've kind of laid out the general process from opening the case to closing the case. As far as the modification process, usually you'll start with a driving evaluation where a specialist will evaluate your needs and determine what modifications are necessary. And then if driver's training is recommended, it would be done after that evaluation and before moving forward with any modifications. And then we would obtain bids. In Missouri, we get 2. And then we can move forward with the VR authorization and getting the vehicle modified. After the vehicle's been modified, Missouri requires a final fitting with the vehicle mod vendor and the driving evaluator, just to make sure everything's safe and works for you. And then VR case is closed after you've maintained employment for 90 days after all your VR services have been completed.
So we wanted to provide information because every state has a VR office. The territories have a VR office, and they're also Native American VR offices. And it used to be called VA VR, but now it's called Veterans Readiness and Employment. So we've provided links for you that will be also available outside of this PowerPoint so that you can find your office and get connected in your state and how that may apply to you. So we thought that it would probably have some questions that we previously thought of in addition to the ones that were submitted. And so is there an age requirement for working with VR? So we typically serve people of working age, which could include high school students of 16 or above, and there's no maximum age. I 85 was the oldest person I've ever worked with. And Jessica had me beat. And I don't remember how old though, Jessica.
Yeah, I had someone that was 92.
So as long as you are working and need something and can meet our eligibility requirements, then we are open to working with you. So what if I'm over financial guidelines? If you're over financial guidelines, you may have an out-of-pocket portion and you need to talk to your VR counselor about your financial eligibility. Jessica, you want to do the next couple?
Do you have to be a U.S. citizen to be eligible for services? No, but you are required to have a valid work permit. I get services through the VA or Native American VR. Can I still get state VR services? Yes, but services cannot overlap. So state VR can't be doing a vehicle modification if VA VR is doing one as well. And then,
I was going to say, yeah, those would vary by state. So if you have very specific questions, that would be, you would need to talk to your current VR person as well as the state VR to see how they can braid services.
And is VR located in all states and U.S. territories? Yes, VR is located in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and all 4 territories.
Awesome. And a question came in late, and I might toss it over to Ryan and Brent because it's about timing. Somebody asked a question, how long, and kind of when we go up to, kind of this process. Ryan and Brent, how long did it take you from start of the process to getting your equipment, vehicle, and driving away? Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say, and obviously it's going to be a little bit different for everyone because some people are going to enter through like age. They're going to be born with a disability and then grow up with it and then do the transition that Mary and Jessica were talking about. But in my case, it was a spinal cord injury. I was injured in May, ended up not going home from rehab until August. And at that time, I had already started the disability process for like SSDI and whatnot, just because we've all got bills to pay, and when you're not working and in the hospital for over 70 days, you gotta get those programs going as fast as possible. So I would say if you don't have that, definitely do it because it's gonna affect how quickly you can move through some of the stuff on the vocational rehab side, specifically when it comes to just some of the funding options. Or I think at least in Missouri it seemed to kind of unhandcuff them on some things that they can do or how fast they can work with some stuff or when it comes to some of the funding and whatnot. So I would say always do it as fast as you can because the process isn't going to go as fast as you would like. But after I came home in August, I went and did I ended up going to outpatient, started working that next July, and then I was driving already with the intent to go back. I believe I had it in like April or May is when I had my vehicle. So it was several months in the long run. However, sometimes in those cases you're still rehabbing and prepping your mind to get back to work. So there's still the time definitely flies by when you're in a rehab gym for 5 hours a day. So
yeah. Okay, thanks. And Brent, how was VR? What was the time frame for you when you went through the VR process?
Yeah, so mine was a little bit different than Ryan's. I already had a vehicle, so I had a truck, and I was transferring over to a van. So I initially wasn't in too much of a hurry. I knew it takes time. Took me about a year to get my process done. But being a mobility specialist and doing this for over 15 years, I've seen it done as little as 4 months. But I would say probably 6 months to a year is probably around the average. Typically with a new client coming on, you have to open the case up, start the case, verify eligibility. And then once all that's done, like they were saying, you have to do driver training, and doing that through a third party sometimes takes a while as far as their scheduling and things like that. So it's usually a 6 months to a year process. So.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, and now we're going to get into some more submitted questions. Again, thank you for everybody that submitted them. They were great. And Mary and Jessica are going to take it from here.
So Shauna in California said she no longer worked due to health issues. Will VR assist me in getting hand controls with my vehicle? And you know, within vocational rehabilitation, every state is a little bit different in the requirements that we have, but typically you do have to be working or working toward employment in order to access some of those VR services. But if you have specific questions with your state, that would be where you would reach out and get more specific answers.
In Texas asks, would VR be able to help with employment? Absolutely. VR is designed to assist individuals with disabilities in finding meaningful employment.
Wayne in Missouri wants to know, I want to go back to work, but my bathroom needs work so I can keep good hygiene. Is there financial help? And we would say potentially yes. You need to open your case with vocational rehabilitation, work on getting eligible, and then there would, if you move forward with us, we would get an evaluation with an occupational therapist to see your needs and then discuss how we would move forward.
Charlotte in Texas asked, where can we expect to end up financially? I think we weren't sure what exactly this was asking. There could potentially be out-of-pocket costs depending on your financial situation and in need.
But we also said you might advance financially if you were able to get to work and then also be able to explore those options. So it could end up both ways. So Leanne in Missouri said, MS progression, both cognitive and physical problems. Am I finished? There's very little MS specific help where I live. So within the state of Missouri, there is an office that covers every county. So my suggestion would be to reach out to the VR office, work on getting a case open, and then start working with your VR counselor to see what services may be provided to you. And so maybe there are some things that we could help you do.
And before we go on to the next set of questions, Ryan, I wanted to go back to the question Wayne in Missouri kind of posted about bathroom. When you went through your VR process, you also needed some home modifications done so you could get out of the house to get to work, kind of to Wayne's point. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, it was a really cool process whenever my OT came and did the home evaluation for that. You know, we touched on a lot of things, the roll under sink in the bathroom being one of them. Before we had like a double vanity that you know, as a wheelchair user, you park side saddle and wash your hands sideways, which is super awkward. And then, you know, not having any experience yet other than the vehicle, I was a little hesitant, just knowing that, you know, you have that like stigma of the government's here to help, and you get, you know, they're gonna give me a roll under sink, but it might be like a rubber tub or something, you know. But I can't stress enough how much effort and planning went into what they did. I mean, it looks like the house was originally designed with a really wide roll under porcelain sink or whatever it's made of, and also with the attention to being able to match the countertops to what they were, and everything. So I mean, like, it was definitely one of those things that gives you some faith in humanity, and Voc Rehab's been one of my favorite uses of tax dollars ever since seeing the just what they're capable of doing for us. So
awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Okay, next set of questions, Mary and Jessica.
So Bobby in Arizona asks or says many states still have VR guidelines that are very outdated, such as go buy an own vehicle first and then submit for conversion. How would you recommend approaching a request to update those guidelines to be more consumer friendly as well as time and cost effective? That's a great question. Advocating for policy updates within VR programs often requires a collaboration between consumers, advocacy groups, and state agencies. One approach would be to work with disability rights organizations to bring attention to those policies. And you can also provide direct feedback to your state's VR advisory committee or legislation representatives. Many states review their VR policies regularly, and consumer input can drive a lot of those improvements and make the process more accessible and efficient.
So Jessica, I'm gonna let you take the next one and I'll take the last two.
Troy in Washington, do you accommodate people who aren't drivers for accessible vehicles, passenger only? Yes, we can do passenger only conversions if it's needed for the passenger to get to and from work or any work related activities. We would just be skipping that like driving eval portion and going straight to the modification.
But every state would be different with that. So that would be a question to ask in Washington state or in your state. So Mark in New York says, do you think the current cuts by the government will affect vocational rehabilitation funding? And that is still up in the air, right? We don't know, and we haven't gotten any information that it will affect it, but we do operate with the idea that it may be affected. We just don't know, but we are continuing with business as usual until we know otherwise. So just hang tight because we will find out. And then the last one is James in California says, does VR assist consumers with cars? There are a couple states that within the parameters set in their state may be able to help with the vehicle portion, but the majority of the states do not help with the vehicle portion, only the modification portion. So again, this is another time to reach back out to your state and see if that is a state that has those coverages.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to try to stop sharing my screen so we can get over. There we go. We are now going to get into Ryan and Brent, who personally have used the VR services, and they're just going to talk about their story, their journey, how they heard about it, and kind of where they are now. So Ryan, I'm going to kick it off to you and take it away.
Yeah, my name's Ryan. I'm the field marketing manager here at United Access. Mostly what I do is try to get our 40 plus locations better relationships with their agencies like vocational rehab, as well as anybody who could be a referral source for coming into adaptive driving. You know, it's one of those things where we don't necessarily just have a brand recognition problem. We have an industry recognition problem or an industry awareness problem. So, you know, it's one of those things where most people who are probably listening to this, you were either born with something or you woke up a customer one day and you have to, you know, you have a lot to figure it out. And it's one of those things where we try to be an easy button in knowing who you can talk to with all the different acronyms of things that can affect your physical abilities. And that's kind of my background. I'm a paraplegic had a traumatic motorcycle wreck. I kind of totaled everything from the lower half down, including a TBI and everything that goes along with that. Luckily, I didn't lose too much function outside of not being able to lift my arms for a while. I did come home in a power chair, and that was one of the things that, you know, as I regained some function and stuff, I was able to slowly transition into a manual chair. And, you know, it's also one of those things that I was also able to make that transition thanks to my local store at United Access. It wasn't originally, I was set up for driving from my power chair, which is a very cool thing to do when you didn't know that that was possible, especially when I wasn't as strong as I am now to be able to make, a confident and independent transfer. So being able to just roll into the van was a big deal. I'll also touch on that as a person who used to stand 6 foot 3 inches tall before I now sit somewhere in the 4 feet in my wheelchair. It's a bigger guy with a bigger power chair. One of those considerations to take into effect on that is all the waves that we have are going to be different sizes, and some of them are going to work great for different heights of people, whether it be a floor on an in-floor ramp vehicle is going to be different height to the steering wheel for somebody than one that has a fold-out ramp. And then also being able to make that choice with your driving OT, that figuring out what the best fit on that is. It's not just figuring out hand controls and whatnot. It's being able to do a full 360 and inside the van in your giant power chair and be able to get out confidently. So there's all kinds of things that take into consideration when you're buying it, and the team of people between United Access, your driving OT, and your Voc Rehab counselor. They're all gonna be able to work together to get you the equipment that you just require. There's usually no well, this might work, but it's too expensive or something. It's usually like, no, this is what you need to be independent and be able to go back to work. Or in the case of a passenger, this is what you need to be able to be driven to work. And so I would just, rest assured that while you should always be a good self-advocate for yourself and raise those questions, just know that the entire team is working for with the best thought and experience behind their belt. So,
Ryan, how did you first hear about the vocational rehab services? Because everything was brand new to you.
Yeah. I when I was in inpatient rehab, I talked to my case manager, and she asked me the all important question of, do you have any interest in going back to work? I said yes, and she kind of started, she dropped the seed that was available. And then after I got to outpatient rehab is when I started working with my counselor. So.
Awesome. Mary, Jessica, anything that you might want to point out from Ryan's perspective that we might have missed before we turn it over to Brent?
I know that we had a topic that we had talked about previously, like how do people get hooked up with VR? How does the referral happen? And we forgot to add that to our slides, but people can hook up with VR all sorts of ways. Maybe a previous client, maybe like Ryan with inpatient, a walk-in from the street, doing a referral online on their website. So every state has those. So if you are interested, then you would contact them and see the best way to connect with your local VR office.
Perfect. Thanks, Mary. All right, Brent, bring us home.
Hello, my name's Brent. 39 years old. I live in Houston, Texas. I'm a mobility specialist here. I got injured when I was 16. That's how I first got introduced to vocational rehab. Initially, it was just to help pay for college, things like that. I also used it to help fund for a lightweight wheelchair, because at the time I had a truck that I would just transfer into, take my chair apart. As I get older and my disability kind of progresses as I age, I guess you'd say, I'm lucky enough to be able to drive all these vans. I realized that using one of those really makes life getting around a lot easier. So I reached out to vocational rehab about a year ago to get the process going to get me an accessible van. I know a lot of people have seen these accessible vans and see the pricing, and it's scary, but with vocational rehab program, you're able to afford these to where they're just like a normal car, just like everybody else. So that's how I got introduced to it. For me, I chose a Chrysler Pacifica just due to size. I'm pretty active. So I have a lot of friends that I take to wheelchair basketball tournaments, things like that. So picking the right vehicle is very important. And like I said, that may change over time. So I know a lot of vocational rehab programs do offer secondary stuff if you get vehicle second time. So it's a great program. It's definitely something everybody needs to look into, because if you're wanting to be gainful employed or just have some independence, there's usually something there to kind of help you out. So.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Such a great topic, such a great program. I really appreciate Mary and Jessica, Ryan and Brent. Anything that we might have missed, panelists, before we shut this down? And this is recorded. This will be on our YouTube channel moving forward. And again, please, please, please reach out with any questions. This was meant to just really kind of dip your toes into some information that is out there, and then we can help kind of move this process forward and hopefully get you some adaptive equipment and help you get back to work.
Just gonna piggyback on Brent talking about aging and progressing. One thing that I really like to do as a counselor is talk to clients about not just what they need now, but what they might need in the future, especially if their disability is progressive. You might now be able to use the manual chair and transfer into a sedan, but will that be the same a month from now, a year from now? And try to make it as cost effective for you. So if you are purchasing a vehicle, you're not buying a car this year and next year having to go to a minivan. So we really try to look at the future too.
Yeah, and then I know Eileen's our chat warrior here answering some questions and stuff, but I did see one that I thought would be worth bringing up. Is somebody asked, is there a time frame since injury that limits eligibility?
And I can jump on that, Ryan, and talk a little bit about it. So becoming a VR client is important to think about timing. So if you are in a inpatient rehab and you're going to be there for a very lengthy amount of time, you know, maybe not the first week that you're there is the right time to do a referral. But as you are looking toward getting released and coming home, or maybe you are talking with your doctor and he is getting more open to allowing you to go back to work after a different kind of injury, that might be the time to start talking about vocational rehabilitation and what services that we could provide to you.
I've gotten referrals from rehab hospitals right when someone goes in, and I still go in and I'll talk to the person and just explain VR and what VR can do, and usually give my card so that when they're getting closer to the end of rehab or going home, they can reach out when they're feeling ready for it. That way they at least have some information going in.
Yep. Thanks, Ryan. That was a great one. Okay, thank you everybody for joining. You will receive information at the end of this via email, and then again, we will have this recorded if you'd like to watch it again, share it with friends, and please reach out with any questions, and appreciate you joining us. Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.